beautiful afternoon. Oh, here we go. All right. Thank you, Daphne. Welcome back to Senate Education on Friday, January 21st. We're going to shift gears. Our closing topic is S211, creating the Vermont Teaching Career Study Committee. The committee talked earlier this week or last week about kind of a two-path system, two paths on this. One, what are some of the things we can be doing for teachers right now? Either, and by now, with some immediacy, or in the budget adjustment, or is there something we should be doing to support them? And then, of course, long-term, how can we continue to take steps to make this the state where we want teachers to have their careers? Ms. Siglowski, once again, it's great having you with us. I think you're at the top of the list today. And if you're ready, I think we'll pass it on to you.
I'm ready. Thank you very
Great.
much. It's great to be back with the committee again to give testimony on S211. Just first off, wanted to let you know that VSBA appreciates the opportunity to serve on the Vermont Teaching Career Study Commission committee, that's envisioned by the bill. We don't necessarily have any other specific comments today on the bill itself, but in addition to specific comments on the bill, you asked us to respond to both the question of what we can do for teachers and school personnel in the future and what we can do to support teachers and school personnel right now. So I have some feedback on those questions. First, I'll start off with some longer term ideas for the future. We would recommend developing a shared understanding at the state level of how to retain, support, and increase the educator workforce. And the reason I bring this up is because currently Secretary French has a task force on the education workforce, which is developing long-term and short-term approaches. And I serve on that task force as the VSBA representative. Through that work, I am aware that the Agency of Education has contracted with an entity to develop recommendations for some long-term approaches. So you may want to ask them to come in and talk about that. Additionally, there are some Vermonters that serve on the New England Secondary Education Consortium's Diversifying the Educator Workforce Task Force, which issued a report in August of 2020 entitled Increasing the Racial, Ethnic, and Linguistic Diversity of the Educator Workforce. And we understand that their collective efforts are building upon the recent work of that task force. So just wanted to emphasize that it would be very helpful if everyone involved in this work was able to work in a coordinated fashion. So we're all, working in the same direction and not duplicating each other's work.
Mr. Siglowski, to that end, how many times how long has Secretary French's working group been around?
I believe it started in November, so it's only met 3 times, I think.
Okay, and if you were to summarize for us where that's at, how would you do so?
I guess my summary would be that we have been focusing a little bit more on the short-term solutions because of the fact that the agency has, as I said, contracted with an entity to develop recommendations for long-term approaches.
And what's the group that the agency is contracted with?
I do not know the name of that group.
Okay. Is that something you might find out for us?
I certainly could. I'm sure that they could come in and speak with you about it as well. Yeah, I don't think that the last time that the task force group met, I don't think the name of that group was public yet because it went through an RFP process and
I see, yeah.
But I think it's public now.
Yeah, again, we're not looking to duplicate work in any way. And, this might be something that we find that, some of the things that we just learned from a little bit of testimony, we pass along to the agency and all of you, mm-hmm. Or we may find that it does need to be formalized in some way in order to get some additional results. But that's great to know.
Okay, I will continue.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Second, tuition forgiveness or scholarships for those entering the professions of teaching, social work, and mental health is a possible strategy. I've added social workers and mental health clinicians to the list because we know they're in short supply and could help to address the significant mental health and behavioral issues in schools. And also, by doing that, help to relieve the stress on teachers in that area. Third, I think I would be remiss if I didn't just briefly point out some important state level concerns that, if they were addressed, would help to retain and attract education employees. As I know you're all aware, there's not sufficient level of housing available in the state for people in this pay range, and affordable, high quality childcare is also very difficult to find. And then finally, this is the last thing on the long-term list. A positive school culture is really critical to retaining and attracting employees. But positive school cultures provide a safe, supportive, encouraging, and challenging environment for staff and students, and they're conducive to professional satisfaction, higher morale and effectiveness, as well as student learning and well-being. Move on now to some short-term ideas, and would just start by saying that we all know very well that the past 2 years have been extraordinarily difficult for schools and school staff. A bonus payment at the state level could be a meaningful way to recognize the hard work that all education employees have been doing in keeping our schools open and operational. If the legislature took this approach, we caution against an expectation that these payments will solve all of the underlying issues that are causing stress, anxiety, and overwork in our schools. And if money was used for bonus payments, additional funds should also be used to address other issues such as increased anxiety and stress of school staff and the system-wide shortage in the education workforce. And just a couple more thoughts on this topic. If provided, if bonus money was provided, it should be applied to all staff at schools, not only teachers. And the money should come out of COVID relief funding rather than the education fund. It shouldn't be considered part of per pupil spending, but this may be complicated by the fact that some districts have already done this for their employees. And a couple of questions that would need to be considered. One would be for school districts that have already done this, because there are some that have already done it locally, either through bonus money or additional time off. Would they be reimbursed, or would this be on top of what was already done? And then another question would be, would bonuses have a meaningful impact on retention and reducing stress? Or would the same amount of money have a bigger impact if it was used for something else? For example, hiring additional mental health support and social workers if they were available.
Yeah.
So with that, I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you on this important topic, which affects the education system currently and has very important implications for the future. And I'm very interested in hearing any ideas from the other witnesses that you have today. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Zaglowski. That's terrific. And it's good to know that it sounds like you said, some school districts have taken the steps on this bonus idea. Maybe a complicated one for the state at the state level to figure out, but I'm glad to hear that some have jumped into it. I think you're spot on, with regard to tuition forgiveness and mental health professionals and teachers. And then with regard to climate in the classroom, school culture, all that kind of thing. Yeah, it'll be interesting to find out more. And again, this isn't on you, this is on us, it's on me to reach out to the agency to find out a little bit more about this, how they're approaching their consultant, what kinds of work, who this person is, how they plan to do it. Because I do think teachers are, in general, overloaded with work, 5 periods, all these other responsibilities, all that kind of thing. And that certainly is right in line with what you're talking about. What's the culture? What are the expectations? All those sorts of things. So thank you for that. Those are all great points. I believe Mr. McWraith. Yeah, great to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. My name is Mike McGrath. I work as the Assistant Executive Director at the Vermont Principals Association. I haven't spent a lot of time with you all, so it's nice to meet you and thank you for having me. I'm here to speak on behalf of the hardworking school leaders, principals, system principals today. I want to thank you first and foremost for paying attention to this. There are a lot of really complex and important issues in the state, in the country. And in education. And I think that this is at the top or very near the top of the issues. I think Sue just gave great testimony and hit on some really important things. And that need to coordinate some of the work is very important, and the need to pay attention to it is as important, in my opinion. So I've submitted written testimony, so you'll have some of the details that I'll share here, and along with a survey that the VPA conducted in May of 2021. So since the pandemic started, part of my work has been to open up Zoom meetings, and we call them drop-ins. We do it 3 times a week. So we've done it 3 times a week since coming up on 2 years. So I've been in hundreds of meetings with school principals as they've navigated the challenges of COVID. And it was about this time last year when I started to notice a trend. I think that's something that, we may have an advantage or the chance to sort of see things that are coming a little bit ahead of time because we're hearing from so many different parts of the state, so many different school leaders on a regular basis. And we noticed that folks that were used to having a challenge, used to having a hard time hiring people, and had problem solved that for years, were coming to us with a different kind of energy. It was more along the lines of going from challenge to crisis. Open positions, second, third grade, no applicants, not just a few applicants, like 0 applicants. And we heard from some folks, and they started to anticipate that they were going to have a lot of open positions. It coincided with the ESSER money to provide relief to schools, and a lot of people's first instinct was to hire more counselors, to hire school counselors, mental health clinicians, and all of that would be great to be able to do. But of course, those people weren't available, or it was very hard to find those people, if not impossible. So that led us, we got so much of that, and there was such a different tenor last winter during that hiring season that we decided to put out a survey and get some numbers to go along with those stories. And I'll just read you a few of the highlights, and you have all of the survey available to you. More than 60% of our respondents, we had 111 school leaders respond last May, reported likely or very likely to have positions go unfilled in the 21-22 school year. That has definitely borne out. 89% of the respondents reported that their given districts would benefit or very much benefit from statewide campaign for recruiting and retaining educators. 92% of the respondents reported that in their given districts would benefit or very much benefit from statewide campaign for recruiting and retaining a more diverse educator workforce. So we have some of the numbers to go along with those stories. I think the anticipation from this time last year to what is currently happening is maybe even a little worse than we had feared. Another poignant story for me, just to illustrate this a little bit further, is that one of our Chittenden County's Career and Technical Education Center, I was spending some time with the director there, and he told me that they have no school counselor all year at a tech center. And I was like, wow, that's really terrible. It's not a good thing for us, for anyone, for those students, certainly. And he also shared that they had no advanced manufacturing teacher, and thus no advanced manufacturing program at their school and as a regional tech center. This really underscored something for me because at the same time I was learning about reading in the paper and having new people move into my neighborhood in South Burlington with Beta Technologies. Beta Technologies is a very exciting company for Vermont. They're building electric airplanes. They're one of only 3 companies in the country doing this. And we know from reading the paper that they're going to hire hundreds, up to maybe even 1,000 employees in the coming year or two. And certainly they would benefit from an advanced manufacturing program just a few miles away. I think that this example is illustrative of the crucial connection between public school investment and our economy, not only for that direct connection to industries like the advanced manufacturing example, but also for the importance of high quality schools as a vital piece of any recruiting strategy for any company like Beta Technology engages in. When they're new employees that they're trying to recruit to the state, one of the first things they're going to do is to look at the schools and make sure that those are strong schools for their children to move into. So I'm illustrating the importance, trying to underscore the seriousness of the issue. And I'll just give you one more example. Just this week, I get these emails a lot. I got an email from a principal in the southern part of the state asking me if I had any idea where they might find help in filling positions that they have had open all year. Paraprofessionals, a literacy interventionist, a school-based mental health counselor, and a school counselor. It's those kinds of stories that make it clear to me that this is at the top of our list of issues, or near the top of our list of issues for schools right now. The more we can pay attention to it and problem solve together, the better. So what can we do right now? I've got a fairly lengthy list here, so I'm going to spare reading it if you've got it in front of you. And I'll just give you a moment to look over those, what we can do right now, and give you a moment to look over what we can do in the future. They're similar to what Sue shared with some more specifics. I'd just like to give you a moment and see if you have any questions about those.
Mr. McGrath, excuse me, as people are looking over that, I just want to go back to something you said. The statewide, encouraging the state to do a statewide campaign for recruitment. Do I have that correct? So right now, it's school by school or district by district. And is there a way for us to, as perhaps we do with other professions, I'm not sure, but go out and really recruit and get us in, the minds of undergraduates as well as seasoned professionals to come to this state.
Right, exactly. And then thinking about the retainment of folks that might decide to take us up on that, on what are some of the strategies that we might have. I think if we had a campaign or an employee or a department dedicated to it, we'd be able to move the needle on it.
Yep. Any questions? I'm just going through Mr. McGrath's recommendations here. Anybody have any questions or comments at this point? Senator Hooker?
I'm just thinking of what Ms. Zaglowski said about the state issues that we face. And, it's great to want to bring people into the state, but without the housing, without the childcare, those things, this is a long-term problem that we have to solve. But what about something, and we've talked about this before, about getting retirees to come back into the classroom to help, even with substituting, with offering courses, retired counselors who might be able to do this. What does the legislature have to do in order to make that possible so that people who want to do that aren't caught between, looking at their retirement decrease because they've increased a certain amount of earnings from something that they're doing to help the situation?
Yeah, the House has a bill on that that some of us were involved in. I know the Vermont Principals Association also was deeply involved in it, which should come to us, I would think, sooner rather than later. I know that Rep Webb is working on it. Do I have want to add anything to that, Mr. McGrath?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Hooker. You're right, as is Senator Campion, that we do have a bill that we're interested in there. And it became very clear to us, particularly when we had a number of superintendents reach out to us to say, did we have anyone that we knew that might be recently retired that could do an interim, for a whole year because someone left their position or in one case, we had a principal die unexpectedly right as the school year was about to start. So, was there anyone that could help? And a lot of the people who were able and willing were recently retired. And that was going to hurt their retirement if they took those jobs to help these schools out. So that is something we're interested in, something I think we can do. And I also want to appreciate your attention to not just pulling in from out of the state, but also grow your own. And you can see in some of the notes that I left there that very interested in that as well. We would like to see a bit of both, right?
Yeah.
I've been working with the CTE directors to explore what it would be like to expand their education programs to what had been a lot focused on early childhood, to expand that, to think about education in general. So students could begin to pursue dual enrollment and education courses while they're in a CTE program and participate and have internships, maybe perhaps right in their own district while they're doing that. So we think that there's some potential there, and any incentives and support from the state for programs like that will legitimize them and provide incentives for students to do that. So we appreciate your attention to the grow your own as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Final questions for Mr. McGrath. Mr. McGrath, are you also an active principal right now?
Yeah, thanks. No, I work full-time for the Vermont Principal Association, a former high school principal in Montpelier and middle school principal in Enosburg.
Great. Okay. Thank you for your work. Okay, terrific. If you don't mind, if you're able to stick around a little bit as we continue our way on testimony. Mr. Francis, great to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Nice to see you. Thank you. Is my audio okay today?
It's okay.
I'll stop my video, but
Okay.
we'll be here with you. So thank you very much. I think this is an incredibly important initiative. I think the bill is a good bill. I won't be redundant with the points that have been made by the folks who have testified previously. But I have a couple of specific recommendations that I want to make. The first is that I would encourage the Senate Education Committee to expand the scope of the study committee charge to include all education-related positions working within the public education community. And the reason for that is—
Jeff, do you mind repeating that? I just didn't get
Sure.
it. Expand the scope.
No. I think that the charge should be expanded to
Yeah.
cover not only teachers, but all education-related positions. And the reasons for that are practical reasons. The current shortages and diminished enthusiasm that we're seeing is not exclusive to teachers. We're seeing it among principals, special education directors, curriculum leaders, and superintendents, most of whom in those positions ascended, if you will, from the teaching positions.
Yeah.
So when you look at the scope of the study that you outline in the bill, all of the issues that teachers are subjected to are also applicable to administrators, for example. So because you'll go to the effort to put a study group together on this issue that will work for 8 meetings over the course of a year, they ought to take a look at the circumstances that are affecting every position in public education. Because if we don't succeed in inducing more folks into the ranks of teachers, then the shortages that we're experiencing in the administrator positions are going to be exacerbated as well. So, what I hear from superintendents is that anecdotally, and I think others will attest to this, that there's a concern right now that folks who are tremendous educators working among the ranks of teachers are sometimes reluctant to move into administrator positions that they otherwise might because of things like working conditions, pay differentials, the length of the work year, and quality of life. Similarly, and Mike McGrath didn't speak about this, but there are many, many, many professionals in this state that have educator credentials that are not working in education. So that's something that we should be paying attention to. And I think that this study committee would be the place to do it. So that's the bill per se. With regard to the question, Senator Campion, that you asked Daphne to extend to us, and those questions are, what can we do for teachers and school personnel in the future? And what can we do to support teachers and school personnel right now? I opened a survey on that this morning to get close to real-time responses from superintendents and assistant superintendents. We've got about 15 responses from superintendents so far. There is a rich array of suggestions that have come in with respect to both of those questions. Many of the suggestions are consistent with suggestions that Mike and Sue Siglowski referenced. But our plan for the Superintendent's Association is to compile those results. We're going to marry the results of our own survey with some research that my colleague Chelsea Myers, who's our associate executive director, and she has research credentials, will put into a summary report that I'll get to you next week. So next week you'll have from us our survey results and some of the compiled research that Chelsea's putting together.
Terrific. I really appreciate that. And thank Ms. Myers. She's terrific. We worked closely with her last year on a number of issues, and a real asset. Thank you.
Yes, I've tried to keep her away from the legislature as much as I can so far. All good things come to an end, I guess.
Great. Any questions for Mr. Francis at this point? Now, I appreciate you bringing, widening this and really thinking about, all facets of the school and the school day, nurses, principals, teachers, everybody, admin assistants, superintendents. It's, very helpful.
Thank you.
Mr. Fannin, before we start, Mr. Fannin, I just want to make sure, a little business, our terrific committee assistant I know has sent you an email about testifying Tuesday. We need to move Bill, and I just want to make sure that we're going to see you Tuesday.
I'm not sure that you will.
Okay.
We'll get back to you on that one. We're still working out that what will happen from our perspective on that.
And by your perspective, we've had some people who have said, yes, they're going to be there. We just haven't heard from, I think, you. So tell me a little bit more about what we should expect, since Tuesday's going to be here soon.
Sure. I think that we're going to try to figure out who best to present on Tuesday.
Okay,
I'm
so
not sure
we
who
are
that
going
is right
to
now.
we are going to hear from some people on Tuesday.
Yes, you will. It just may not be me. That's why I'm not accepting the invitation, because I'm not sure. I don't want to, accept something and not show up. It's not that. It's just we're trying to figure out who to present on the issue, who's the best person to present.
Yeah, if you could just get back to her,
Absolutely.
sounds like that's helpful.
We are working on. I'll say this, Senator. We are working on it and want to get back to you as soon as possible. We've got trying to sort out who that person will be and their availability.
Great. So we will be hearing from somebody.
Correct.
Might not be you, but we're full steam ahead on Tuesday with with hearing from somebody. That's
Yes.
helpful. Okay, great. So with that, 211.
211. So good afternoon. I'm Jeff Fannin, the Executive Director of Vermont NEA. And I'm here today representing the 13,000 members of Vermont NEA across the state who are suffering, not only from the effects of the pandemic, which are significant, but also from the effects of and the issues with teacher and educator staffing shortages. These are both predate the pandemic and have been exacerbated by the pandemic and during the pandemic. So it's short and long term, and that your questions that you asked Daphne to ask us to address as well as 211 are poignant in that regard. So to be clear, Vermont NEA does support 211. I did see Jeff Francis's comments and support his expansion. I think that makes infinite sense. So on the fly here, saying that works. And I'll say this, NEA has been working the national level with the Learning Policy Institute on teacher shortage for some years. And I think it would be good for the study committee to hear from LPI. They've got a wealth of information, research. There's a lot of data on this, but we need more data. Everybody does. And so, some of the key factors that influence teacher supply, quality preparation programs. We want to make sure that there are quality preparation programs. Quality mentoring and induction, huge points. The competitiveness of compensation. We want to make sure that teachers are well compensated, no doubt, and the quality of the work conditions. And I think Sue Siglowski from the School Board Association talked about compensation and working conditions. Those are key. And what we're hearing more and more is that people who stay in the profession think they're compensated appropriately, as well as their working conditions are good. Maybe not perfect, but good. And what we're hearing too much now is probably in large measure because of the pandemic. People are saying, I'm not compensated enough to risk all of the issues that are coming at me. They're swamped, they're overburdened. Students are struggling themselves, and that shows up in the doorstep and in the classroom. So there's a lot going on for schools. Spent yesterday with several groups of teachers. And I will tell you, the stories are heartbreaking in some situations. Kids are really struggling. They're suffering from significant trauma as a result of this. The mental health system, while not in collapse, is certainly under great strain. And that goes for adults and students, kids. And so they are symbiotic. In other words, they work well together when they work well together. But if one of the links in that chain is broken or having problems, that shows up in the other. And right now, the mental health system is under great strain. That's putting great strain on the school system, and it's vice versa. So I think we need to get a hold of the mental health system and look at that as well. So I think this committee could look at that too, because I think that's part of the reality that's showing up in schools these days. So one of the key things that we've been seeing and hearing up for years, and Vermont NEA does provide some great mentoring programs, but that's only where school districts allow us to come in. But we think there's a need for a statewide mentoring program to make sure that new teachers choose to stay, and that requires experienced expert teachers to be given time to meet with the newer teachers, and they need to have time to meet with the mentor.
Mr. Fannin, could you say something about why some districts or schools won't let those mentoring programs happen?
I don't know, to be very honest with you. We've worked with a bunch of schools, and that's great, but not all schools. And I think it certainly, they're under great pressure right now.
Yeah.
So starting a new program, as you've heard from all the education groups, adding more to their plate right now is not going to be well received. In fact, a significant pushback.
Yeah.
So I think that, that's a long-term question with a long-term solution. In the immediate moment, I don't think adding it to any school district's plate is advisable, but we ought to be adding it to it down the road to ensure that we retain good people. And as the Learning Policy Institute has said, I think it's $1,100 for it costs schools districts $1,100 for teacher turnover, in addition to salary and other things. So there's a cost associated with turnover. And having worked in the private sector years ago, you focus on what you have. It's a whole lot cheaper to retain people than it is to go out and recruit new people. So if you have good retention systems, you have good working conditions, and you have appropriate compensation systems, you will retain good people and attract new people. It's really not dramatically different or rocket science here, I should say. Those are the simple principles at play here. Now, having said that, this study committee in S211 ought to look at that a bit more closely. And I agree with Jeff Francis's thought about expanding it to all school employees. But that's part of it. So, I certainly agree with Mike McCrae's comments about teachers of color, educators of color. Certainly students of color do better when taught by teachers of color. And that's part of it. I think the notion there of grow your own, that may be a perfect example of where that could really excel and be great for students and student outcomes. So I support what Mike said in that regard about grow your own. I think that's a great idea. I did reach out to VSAC. I'm still trying to connect with folks there about loan forgiveness. And I think that's an option that should be on the table for this group, the study committee.
It's actually interesting that we haven't done something like that. I mean, to me, I don't know.
Yeah, certainly we've been saying for a good long while that loan forgiveness, free college, however you want to frame it, but we ought not to be, we're a well-educated society, and good for us for being so. We ought to retain that and grow that, and not go in the other direction. College is very expensive. Kids are graduating with enormous sums of debt that burden them and slow the economy down in other ways. And why we think that's advisable, I don't know. But we ought to, look at that and explore ways to make it. I can't
agree more. I'd say the NEA probably knows our teachers better than any of us, in some ways. Well, I'd say the principal, don't get me wrong, the other groups as well, but it would be great if I know you're working to reach out to VSAC, but I'd love a proposal. I really, we could spend, the next, 10 days taking testimony, but I suspect you probably could at least put a proposal on the table sooner than that for us. So any work that you could do with VSAC would really be appreciated, just to say, hey, this is something that, we think this would look, and maybe you've put proposals before. If so, I'd love to see those, because I think it's a winner, honestly, to be able to offer some kind of debt relief for teachers.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
The amount of debt some students or college students are graduating is staggering.
Unconscionable. Yeah. I can't agree more. Yeah. And it stifles, it stifles everything. Creativity. It's, people have to, it's
and
terrible situation for Americans.
Yeah, the average teacher in Vermont is making, I think, $64,000 a year. That's the average teacher salary. The average teacher is a woman. The average teacher has a master's. You want to talk about the pay gap? There it is, right there. And so we need to do better by those students, because if you're a young person in college, this is not and you have enormous student loan debts, and many do.
Yeah.
this is probably not the place where you're going to be able to pay off your debts very quickly. So you're then going to have, be buying a used car, not being able to buy a house, all of the other things that flow from carrying that debt slow the economy down. And it's not productive. And lastly, I'll say that as to working conditions, which we think are, and Sue mentioned this as well, working conditions are critical to attracting people to the teaching profession.
Yeah.
And we've been in a 2 decades long, at least, process of what we call test and punish. So we've standardized test schools and students to death in the last 2 decades. Students who are graduating high school have grown up in nothing but that environment. And the joy of teaching is not there anymore. And so simply returning to the joy of teaching, allowing teachers to teach, getting away from standardized testing. And I know that's a federal requirement, and I'm trying to work on that as we speak, if you will. And I think that we need to allow teachers to return to the joy of teaching as much as humanly possible. And certainly in this year, we ought to be de-emphasizing as much as we can the focus on standardized testing. I heard a teacher just yesterday say that I think it was the NAEP test was canceled in her school next week because they have COVID, an outbreak of COVID. Why we're giving these standardized tests in the middle of a health pandemic is just beyond the pale. And why we're focusing and prepping students to take a standardized test in the spring right now is just, it's ludicrous.
Yeah.
These kids need to be learning.
Who have you reached out to stop this process?
Well, the federal delegations were, and it's all happening.
You have written to them?
Yes.
Okay. I'd appreciate it if you would share that letter, because I think this committee should follow up with what you've sent.
Well, I'll send you something, but I mean, if you can't send us, I mean, I suspect it's public record. I mean, so just send us what you've sent to them, and that way we can follow up, and we can mention having, that we see your letter, Well, I'll say it this way, Senator. It would be helpful if the state, from the governor on down, and the Senate and the House were to make a statement to the congressional delegation to say, we don't need standardized testing. This is not.
No, absolutely. I fully agree. But I think your letter will help us to build on that. In other words, to say, okay, we support what the NEA has said. This is what, however you've outlined it. I think that's really good for us, that information for us to have. Absolutely. And for us to just to dig into it a little bit so that, whatever we come out with, we've heard from folks, et cetera.
Right. I mean, I'm fine. That's fine. I don't think it needs to be overthought, though. I'll just say that.
No, I agree. No, honestly,
we've been at this for 2 decades, Senator.
Yeah.
The No Child Left Behind test and punish regime has been around, and we're
just honestly, I think it's just helpful to us to see what you wrote so that we can say, hey, we heard from the NEA. This is important, and just can back you up like that. Senator Chinden.
I just want to completely agree with you, Chair Campion. And I think that's one thing that the teachers would greatly appreciate during this pandemic, that the assessment isn't going to be a true measure because the kids have been in such odd scenarios, and it would just give them the relief valve that they so desperately need in these really trying times so that they could focus on teaching during those 1 to 2 weeks of SBAC instead of the SBAC.
Yeah, great. Senator Lyons.
So I just really can't resist weighing in about having us review the mental health system. It'll only take about 4 or 5 weeks. So just to share with you that our committee is beginning its work, not beginning, but we're looking at mental health issues. And part of our work next week is to look at what the stresses and strains are within the education system, within the community, and within both adult and adolescent and younger children's needs. And I just spent another hour meeting, talking with folks about this. And I think there's so much to do. The issue that has always been problematic, of course, is that teachers in schools are not trained to be mental health counselors when it reaches a level of really significant need as we see it today. And so what we need to do, if we pick it up here in this committee, and I'm not against that, it's just that it's a long haul. It's going to be something that becomes embedded in schools as that schools are paying for. We don't want that. I think there are other ways of accomplishing our goals by establishing some community resources that are linked with schools. And that's the kind of thing that we'll be talking about. And I think that Chair Campion and maybe Vice Chair Hooker and I will probably have to have a conversation. And then to link all of that mental health with the stress of exams during a pandemic is pretty clear that the stress of exams is inappropriate right now, and it's inappropriate both for teachers and for students. I think we can measure their abilities and their achievement in other ways. So, but that's just a surface opinion at this point, but I completely I concur with what the chair of the committee has said, and I'd like to know how we can support our kids and our teachers and keeping exams at a low rate.
You know, the legislature passed a couple of years ago the community schools bill. It's a pilot program to start, and I think it might be good. It may be early, maybe a bit early, but to start to hear from some of the schools who are involved and see how that's going, because part of that is bringing mental health services into the schools. You're right. We don't want schools to pay for it. They're not mental health providers. They're educators. And many, you know, right now during the pandemic, many school staff are themselves suffering. So hearing from schools who are going through the community schools process might be good to hear. Maybe a bit premature, but
no, I think that's a good idea. Great. So yes, Senator Chinden.
I was just going to say, my lovely wife, a public school teacher, walked in and she was very happy to hear me advocating for less testing. So for whatever that's worth offering.
Yes.
But I think we lost her quorum. If that
Yeah,
matters.
no, they're dropping fast. Yes, we will. What we will do is on Tuesday, we will have a look at Mr. Fannon's letter. We'll have Ledge Council in. We will have, we'll kind of build off of that and likely speak with one voice. So terrific. Anything else from you at this point, Mr. Fannon?
no, not at this point. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, committee. Oh yes, Mr. McRaith.
I won't keep you. I just wanted to make sure you saw my note in the chat. There's a House Ed Bill 547 that's about opting out of federal testing. So that bill is started over there. And I want to underscore what Sue said about duplicate efforts on the workforce issue. There are several efforts across the state that some of them are a couple years old, some of them are new, some of them are grassroots. So anything we can do to get that coordinated will be helpful. Yeah.
No, I think you bring up a great point. Thank you for letting me know about the bill, H547. And then I think you're right. There are a lot of different things going on out there. And are there ways for us, as you say, to sort of gather that information, curate that information, and all get on the same page? Terrific. Okay. Thank you, Mr. McGrath. What's left of the committee? I know we've got somebody traveling and then two people who had meetings. So I think you can take us off